The sun bled crimson across the Wyoming sky, painting the Bighorn River in hues of fire and regret. Levi Stratton knelt by the riverbed, his calloused hands sifting through the silt, searching for salvation in the form of gold flecks that never materialized. His ranch, a patchwork of dreams and debt, teetered on the edge of foreclosure. The bank's deadline loomed like a noose, and the land his father had carved from nothing was slipping through his fingers. At 32, Levi's broad shoulders carried the weight of a failing legacy, his hazel eyes hardened by years of drought and disappointment. His chestnut mare, Juniper, snorted softly behind him, her hoof pawing the cracked earth as if she too sensed the desperation in the air. He plunged his hands deeper into the cold current, the water biting at his knuckles. His fingers brushed something solid, not the soft give of mud or the jagged edge of river rock. He pulled it free, shaking off the silt. A locket, small and tarnished, glinted in his palm. Its silver surface was etched with a delicate pattern of vines, worn but intricate, like a memory half forgotten. Levi turned it over, his thumb tracing the clasp. It sprang open with a faint click, revealing a miniature portrait of a woman with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a secret. A folded scrap of paper tucked behind the portrait caught his eye, but before he could unfold it, a rustle in the sagebrush snapped his attention upstream. A figure crouched low, barely visible against the twilight. Levi's hand instinctively went to the revolver at his hip, but he didn't draw. The figure was small, cloaked in a tattered shawl, moving with the cautious grace of a deer sensing a predator. He squinted, catching the glint of a rifle barrel half hidden under the shawl. Whoever it was, they weren't here for a friendly chat. Levi stood slowly, the locket still clutched in his left hand, and called out, his voice steady but low, like the rumble of distant thunder. "You lost, stranger." The figure froze, then rose, shedding the shawl. A woman no older than 25 stood before him. Her dark hair spilled in waves over her shoulders, framing a face both fierce and fragile, like a storm about to break. Her eyes, sharp and gray as gunmetal, locked onto his, and Levi felt a jolt, as if the river itself had surged through his chest. She wore a faded blue dress, torn at the hem, and her boots were caked with mud, but there was a defiance in her stance that made her seem taller than she was. The rifle hung loose in her hands, not aimed, but ready. "I ain't lost," she said, her voice carrying a faint southern drawl, edged with wariness. "You the one poking around my river." Levi raised an eyebrow, glancing at the locket in his hand. "Your river? Last I checked, the Bighorn don't belong to nobody but the fish." He held up the locket, letting it catch the dying light. "This yours too?" Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of panic betraying her composure. She took a step forward, then stopped, as if rethinking the move. "Where'd you find that?" she asked, her tone sharp but not accusing. "Riverbed," Levi said, watching her closely. "Got your picture inside. Care to explain why it's sitting at the bottom of my claim?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze darted to the locket, then back to him, weighing him like a card player sizing up a bluff. "Name's Ellie," she said finally, ignoring his question. "Ellie Boone. And you're Levi Stratton, ain't you? The rancher who's about to lose his land to the bank in Sheridan." Levi's jaw tightened. Her knowing his name and his troubles felt like a blade pressed too close. "Word travels fast," he said, his voice cooler now. "But you didn't answer my question, Ellie Boone. What's a woman with a rifle and a locket doing skulking around my river?" Ellie's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Maybe I'm just passing through. Maybe I'm looking for something I lost." She nodded at the locket. "That's mine, and I'd like it back." Levi didn't move to hand it over. The paper inside the locket weighed on his mind, its secrets tugging at him like the current. "Seems to me," he said, "a locket like this don't end up in a river by accident. You running from something?" Her expression hardened, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, like a shadow crossing the moon. "You ask too many questions, rancher." She shifted her grip on the rifle, not raising it, but making her point clear. "Give it back, and I'll be on my way." Levi's gut told him she was trouble, the kind that could burn a man's life to ash. But there was something in her voice, a tremor beneath the steel, that stirred a memory of his own, a time when he'd been running too, from debts and dreams gone sour. He slipped the locket into his pocket, ignoring her sharp intake of breath. "Tell you what," he said, "you want this back? You tell me what you're running from. Fair trade." Ellie's eyes narrowed, but before she could answer, a low whistle cut through the dusk. It came from the ridge above, sharp and deliberate, like a signal. Her head snapped toward the sound, her body tensing like a coiled spring. Levi followed her gaze, spotting two silhouettes against the skyline, men on horseback, their hats low and their rifles glinting. Bounty hunters, he'd wager, from the way they moved, slow and predatory. "Friends of yours?" Levi asked, his hand resting on his revolver now. Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper, urgent and raw. "You don't want to know them, Levi Stratton. Give me the locket and let me go, or we're both dead." He studied her, the locket burning a hole in his pocket. The paper inside might hold answers, but those riders on the ridge promised trouble. He could hand it over, let her disappear into the night, and go back to his failing ranch. Or he could take a chance on a woman with secrets as deep as the river itself. The choice hung in the air, heavy as the Wyoming dust. "Keep that rifle ready," he said, his voice low. "We ain't done talking." Ellie's eyes met his, surprise flickering there before it was swallowed by resolve. She nodded once, sharp and certain, as the sound of hoofbeats grew louder, rolling down the ridge like a storm. The hoofbeats thundered closer, kicking up clouds of dust that shimmered in the fading light. Levi Stratton crouched beside Ellie Boone, the river's cold breath at their backs, the locket a heavy secret in his pocket. Her rifle rested steady in her hands, her gray eyes scanning the ridge where the two riders descended, their silhouettes sharp against the bruised sky. Levi's own revolver felt warm against his palm, but his gaze kept drifting to Ellie. Her jaw set, her breath quick but controlled, like a woman who'd faced death before and hadn't blinked. The air between them crackled, not just with danger but with something unspoken, a current as undeniable as the Bighorn's flow. "Stay low," Ellie whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of the river. "They're not here for you, but they won't care who gets in their way." Levi's lips twitched into a half smile, despite the tension coiling in his chest. "Good to know I'm just collateral damage." He nodded toward the riders, now close enough to make out their weathered coats and the glint of badges pinned to their chests. "Bounty hunters, I'm guessing. What did you do to earn their attention?" Ellie shot him a look, sharp and fleeting, like a blade catching sunlight. "Later," she hissed, "unless you fancy a bullet for your curiosity." He didn't press her. The riders were nearly upon them, their horses slowing to a deliberate trot. Levi's eyes flicked to the terrain, scattered sagebrush, a cluster of cottonwoods to their left, and the river's shallow bend behind. Cover was sparse, and running would only draw attention. He tightened his grip on the revolver, his mind racing. The locket's weight in his pocket felt like a tether, binding him to this woman and her secrets. He didn't know her story, but he knew the look of someone cornered, and Ellie Boone was a fox with nowhere left to run. The lead rider, a lean man with a scar slicing through his left eyebrow, reined in his horse 20 paces away, His partner, broader and bearded, flanked him, both men's rifles resting casually across their saddles. The scarred one tipped his hat, his smile cold as a winter creek. "Evenin'," he called, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "Name's Virgil Slade. This here's Gus Harlan. We're looking for a woman. Goes by Ellie Boone. Seen her?" Levi felt Ellie tense beside him, her shoulder brushing his as she shifted her weight. He kept his own expression neutral, his voice steady as he rose to his feet, one hand raised in a gesture of peace, the other still on his gun. "Can't say I have," he lied, meeting Virgil's gaze. "Just me and the river out here, panning for gold that don't exist." Virgil's eyes narrowed, his smile fading. "That's so funny, 'cause we heard tell of a woman matching her description skulking up round these parts. Dark hair, gray eyes, carries a rifle like she knows how to use it." His gaze slid past Levi, settling on Ellie, who ducked lower behind a jut of rock. "Might be you're not alone, rancher." Levi's heart kicked against his ribs, but he didn't flinch. "You're welcome to look around," he said, gesturing to the empty riverbed. "But all you'll find is mud and a man trying to keep his land." Gus, the bearded one, chuckled, a low, guttural sound. "Land ain't yours much longer, Stratton. Word is, the bank's got your name on a dotted line." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with the malice. "Maybe you're hiding her for a cut of whatever she's carrying. Heard Ellie Boone's got something worth more than your ranch." Levi's blood ran cold. They knew his name, his troubles, and now they were sniffing around Ellie's secrets. The locket seemed to burn in his pocket, its folded paper a mystery he hadn't yet unraveled. He glanced at Ellie, her face half hidden but her eyes fierce, urging him to keep their attention. He stepped forward, drawing the hunter's gaze. "You boys seem mighty sure of yourselves," he said, his tone light but edged with steel. "But I ain't in the habit of sharing my river with strangers. Say your piece and move on." Virgil's hand twitched toward his rifle, but before he could act, a sharp crack echoed from the cottonwoods. A bullet kicked up dirt a foot from Gus's horse, sending it rearing. Levi spun, his revolver half drawn, as a third figure emerged from the trees, a wiry man with a weathered hat and a rifle still smoking. "That's far enough, Slade," the newcomer called, his voice rough as gravel. "You and Harlan ain't welcome here." Ellie sucked in a breath, her eyes widening with recognition. Levi didn't know the man, but his presence shifted the odds. Virgil's face twisted with fury, but he raised a hand to calm Gus, whose horse still snorted nervously. "Jasper Cole," Virgil spat. "Didn't figure you for a fool, sticking your neck out for her." Jasper stepped closer, his rifle steady. "Ain't about her," he said, his eyes flicking to Levi. "This is Stratton land. You're trespassing." Levi seized the moment, stepping between the hunters and Ellie. "You heard the man," he said, his voice hard now. "Ride out, or we'll see how many bullets it takes to make the point." Virgil's jaw worked, his eyes darting between Levi, Jasper, and the rock where Ellie hid. For a tense moment, the only sound was the river's murmur and the creak of saddle leather. Then Virgil laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're making a mistake, rancher," he said. "She's worth more trouble than you can handle." He jerked his head at Gus, and the two wheeled their horses, kicking up dust as they retreated up the ridge. Levi didn't exhale until their silhouettes vanished. He turned to Ellie, who'd risen from her crouch, her rifle still at the ready. "You gonna tell me who Jasper is?" he said, "or do I have to guess that too?" Jasper reached them before she could answer, his weathered face creased with a wry grin. "Jasper Cole, friend of her pa's," he said, tipping his hat to Levi. "And you're the fool who didn't hand her over." His eyes softened as they settled on Ellie. "You all right, girl?" Ellie nodded, but her gaze stayed on Levi, searching, as if weighing whether he was ally or liability. "Thanks," she said, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. Didn't expect you to cover for me. Levi pulled the locket from his pocket, holding it up but not handing it over. Didn't do it for you, he said, though the lie tasted bitter. I don't take kindly to men like that on my land. He glanced at Jasper. You got a stake in this? Jasper's grin faded. Ellie's pa was my partner back in the day. Owed him a debt I can't repay. He looked at Ellie, something unspoken passing between them. She's got trouble bigger than those hunters, Stratton. You sure you want to be part of it? Levi's thumb brushed the locket's clasp, the portrait inside flashing in his mind. Ellie's face, younger, softer, but with the same fierce eyes. The paper inside held answers. He was sure of it, but so did the woman standing before him. The river rushed on, carrying the last of the daylight, and Levi felt the weight of a choice he couldn't undo. I'm already in it, he said, his voice low, as he slipped the locket back into his pocket. Now, who's going to tell me what's worth dying for? Ellie's lips parted, but before she could speak, Jasper's hand shot up, silencing her. A faint rumble echoed from the ridge, not hoofbeats, but something heavier, like a wagon. Levi's gut twisted. The hunters hadn't left. They'd just gone for reinforcements. The rumble grew louder, a low growl rolling down the ridge like a gathering storm. Levi Stratton's hand tightened on his revolver, the locket in his pocket, a pulsing weight against his thigh. Ellie Boone stood rigid beside him, her rifle raised, her gray eyes scanning the darkening horizon where the dust churned under the approach of something heavier than horses. Jasper Cole, his weathered face taut, swung his own rifle toward the sound, his boots planted firm in the riverbed's silt. The Bighorn's steady rush seemed to mock their stillness, its current carrying secrets neither Levi nor the night could fully grasp. The air was thick with the scent of sage and gunpowder, and Levi's pulse hammered in his ears. Each beat a warning that trouble wasn't just coming, it was already here. Wagon, Jasper muttered, squinting into the dusk. Slade and Harlan brought company. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd seen too many ambushes to mistake the signs. He glanced at Ellie, his expression unreadable. You sure about this, girl? Last chance to run. Ellie's jaw clenched, her gaze flicking to Levi, then back to the ridge. Run-in's what got me here, she said, her southern drawl sharp with defiance. Ain't doing it again. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, her knuckles pale but steady. Levi caught the fire in her eyes, the same fire he'd seen in the Locket's portrait, and something stirred in him. Admiration, maybe, or the reckless pull of a man already too deep in a game he didn't understand. Then we hold ground, Levi said, his voice low but firm, like iron striking stone. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Ellie and the approaching threat, his revolver drawn now, its barrel catching the last glimmers of twilight. The wagon's shape emerged from the dust, a heavy, canvas-covered rig, flanked by Virgil Slade and Gus Harlan on horseback, their rifles glinting. But it was the third figure, standing tall in the wagon's driver's seat, that sent a chill through Levi's bones. A man, broad-shouldered and cloaked in black, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. His presence felt wrong, like a vulture circling a fresh kill. Who's that? Levi asked, his voice barely above a whisper, directed at Ellie. Her breath hitched, a sound so faint he almost missed it. Amos Creed, she said, the name dripping with dread. He don't hunt for bounties. He hunts for blood. Before Levi could press her, the wagon lurched to a stop 30 yards away, its wheels creaking like a death knell. Virgil and Gus dismounted, their boots crunching on the dry earth, but Amos remained in the wagon, his silhouette unnervingly still. Virgil stepped forward, his scarred face twisted into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Told you, Stratton," he called. "You picked the wrong side. Hand over the girl, and maybe we let you walk back to that dyin' ranch of yours." Levi's grip on his revolver tightened, but his eyes flicked to the wagon, where Amos's shadow loomed. "You're awful fond of talkin'," Levi shot back, his tone steady despite the odds. "But I don't see you drawin'. You plannin' to bore me to death?" Gus laughed, a harsh bark, but Amos's voice cut through it, low and smooth, like a blade sliding from its sheath. "Enough!" He stepped down from the wagon, his movements deliberate, each step raising a puff of dust. His face came into view, hard angles, eyes black as coal, and a smile that promised pain. In his hand was no rifle, but a coiled bullwhip, its leather glinting like a snake ready to strike. "Ellie Boone," he said, his voice carrying over the river's murmur. "You've been a hard woman to find." Ellie's rifle snapped up, aimed square at Amos's chest. "You're wasting your time, Creed," she said, her voice steady, but laced with something raw, like a wound torn open. "I ain't got what you're looking for." Amos tilted his head, his smile widening. "Liar," he said softly. "You've got it, and I'll carve it out of you if I have to." Levi's mind raced, the locket's weight burning in his pocket, the folded paper inside. He hadn't read it, but Amos's words confirmed what he'd suspected. It wasn't just a trinket. It was a map, a key, something worth killing for. He glanced at Ellie, her face pale but fierce, and then at Jasper, whose rifle hadn't wavered. 3 against 3, but Amos's presence tipped the scales. Levi had faced down rustlers and storms, but this man was a different kind of predator. "Last chance, rancher," Virgil said, his hand hovering over his gun. "Walk away." Levi's eyes locked on Amos, reading the man's coiled tension, the whip dangling like a promise of violence. "Jasper," Levi said, his voice calm but urgent. "You with me?" Jasper's grin was grim. "Till the end, Stratton." The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a blur, Amos's whip cracked, the sound splitting the air like thunder. Levi dove, shoving Ellie behind the rock as the leather snapped inches from his face, tearing a gash in the earth. Gunfire erupted. Jasper's rifle roared, and Gus's horse screamed as a bullet grazed its flank. Levi rolled, firing his revolver, the shot clipping Virgil's shoulder. The hunter cursed, stumbling back, but Amos was already moving, his whip lashing out again, catching Jasper's arm and yanking him off balance. Ellie fired, her rifle's report echoing across the river. The bullet missed Amos, but it forced him to duck, giving Levi a heartbeat to scramble to his feet. He grabbed Ellie's arm. A system. The artifact was cut off due to the response limit. Here is the continuation to complete Part 3, ensuring a smooth transition and compliance with all requirements. M, pulling her toward the cottonwoods. "Move," he shouted, as another crack of Amos's whip sliced the air behind them. They dove behind a cluster of trees, Jasper stumbling after them, blood seeping through his torn sleeve. The gunfire paused, the hunters regrouping in the open. Levi's chest heaved, his eyes scanning the shadows for a way out. The river was too wide to cross, and the ridge was exposed. They were pinned. Ellie's breath was ragged, but her grip on the rifle was iron. "He won't stop," she whispered, her voice trembling with something deeper than fear, rage maybe, or guilt. "Amos never stops." Levi's hand brushed the locket in his pocket, his mind snapping to the paper inside. "What's he after, Ellie?" he demanded, his voice low and urgent. "The truth." Now, her eyes met his, wide and haunted. "A map," she said, "to a cache of gold. Hidden by my pa before he died. Amos thinks I know where it is. Levi's blood ran cold. Gold. The word explained everything. The hunters, the whip, the relentless pursuit. He pulled the locket from his pocket, flipping it open. The folded paper fell into his hand, and he unfolded it under the dim moonlight. A crude sketch of a canyon, marked with a cross and a name. Blackwood Gorge. His heart sank. That was a week's ride from here, through hostile territory. You know this place? He asked, holding up the paper. Ellie nodded, her face pale. I've never been, but Pa said it was enough to buy a new life. Her voice cracked. Or end one. Before Levi could respond, a new sound shattered the silence. A low, guttural chant, rising from the ridge. Levi peered through the trees, his stomach twisting. A dozen shadows moved in the darkness, their faces painted with streaks of red and black, rifles raised, not bounty hunters. Outlaws, likely hired by Amos, their chants a war cry that chilled the blood. Jasper cursed under his breath. The Red Blade Gang. Creed's got friends. Levi's mind raced. 3 against 15, maybe more, with Amos's whip and the hunter's rifles in the mix. The Locket's map was their only leverage, but it was useless if they didn't survive the night. He turned to Ellie, her face a mask of determination despite the odds. You trust me? He asked. Her eyes searched his, then softened, just for a moment. Ain't got a choice, rancher. He nodded, his plan forming. Jasper, can you draw their fire? Jasper's grin was feral. Reckon I can. He checked his rifle, wincing at his wounded arm. You two get to the horses. I'll cover you. Levi hesitated, but Jasper's hard stare brooked no argument. Go, the older man growled. Levi grabbed Ellie's hand, pulling her toward Juniper and the other horses tied near the river. Behind them, Jasper's rifle cracked, answered by a hail of bullets that splintered the cottonwoods. Levi's heart pounded as he untied Juniper, helping Ellie onto a roan mare. The chant grew louder, closer, and Amos's whip cracked again, followed by Jasper's sharp cry. They rode hard, the river flashing past, bullets whining through the air. Levi's mind burned with the map's image. Blackwood Gorge, a fortune, a death sentence. Ellie's secret wasn't just hers anymore. It was his too. The night swallowed Levi Stratton and Ellie Boone as they tore through the Wyoming dark, the bighorn's roar fading behind them. Juniper's hooves pounded the earth, the roan mare keeping pace. Ellie's silhouette hunched low against the wind. Bullets had stopped whistling past, but the echo of Jasper's cry lingered in Levi's mind, sharp as a spur in his side. The locket, tucked back in his pocket, seemed to pulse with the map's promise. Blackwood Gorge, a fortune in gold, and a noose tightening around them both. The Red Blade Gang's war chant still haunted the air, faint but relentless, a reminder that Amos Creed and his hunters weren't far behind. They rode until the horses' flanks heaved, the terrain shifting from riverbed to rolling hills dotted with scrub pine. Levi reined in Juniper near a shallow gully, its walls offering meager cover. Ellie slid from the roan, her rifle still clutched tight, her gray eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The moonlight caught her face, etching shadows that made her look both fierce and fragile, like a blade dulled by too many battles. Levi dismounted, his boots crunching on gravel, his heart still racing from the fight and the weight of Jasper's sacrifice. We can't stay here long, Ellie said, her voice low, that southern drawl threaded with urgency. Amos will track us by dawn. Levi nodded, tying Juniper to a gnarled pine. Jasper bought us time, he said, his voice rough, but we need a plan. That map in your locket. Blackwood Gorge ain't exactly a Sunday ride. You got any idea what we're walking into? Ellie's lips pressed thin, her gaze dropping to the ground. Pa said it was hidden deep where the canyon narrows, gold from a stagecoach robbery, enough to set him free of his debts. She looked up, her eyes meeting his, raw with something like shame. He never got the chance to claim it. Levi's jaw tightened. Her story matched the Locket's map, but it raised more questions than answers. And Amos? How's he tied to this? Before she could answer, a rustle in the gully made them both freeze. Levi's revolver was out in a heartbeat, Ellie's rifle snapping up beside him. A figure stumbled into view, hands raised, his weathered hat askew. "Don't shoot," came a familiar gravelly voice. "It's me, damn it, Jasper." Levi lowered his gun, relief warring with disbelief. The older man limped forward, his arm bleeding through a makeshift bandage, his grin crooked but alive. "Thought you were done for." Jasper snorted, wincing as he leaned against the gully wall. "Takes more than a whip to kill me, Stratton. Got one of their horses, too." He jerked a thumb toward a bay gelding tethered nearby. "Figured you two'd need me more than the angels." Ellie's face softened, a rare crack in her armor. "You old fool," she said, stepping forward to check his wound. "You should have run." Jasper waved her off, his grin widening. "And miss seeing you two bicker like an old married couple? Not a chance." Levi's cheeks burned, and he caught Ellie's quick glance, her own face flushing before she turned away, fussing over Jasper's bandage. The moment hung awkward, the air between them charged with unspoken truths. Levi cleared his throat, trying to shake off the heat rising in his chest. "Right," he said, his voice gruffer than intended. "We need to move before Amos catches our trail. Any ideas?" Jasper's eyes twinkled with mischief, despite the blood staining his sleeve. "There's a trading post a day's ride north, near the Shoshone border. Old friend of mine runs it, Nora Blackwood. She's got a knack for hiding folks who don't want to be found." "Nora Blackwood?" Ellie's voice sharpened, her hands pausing on Jasper's bandage. "As in Blackwood Gorge?" Jasper's grin faltered just for a second. "Her pa owned land out that way. Might know something about your map." He glanced at Levi, his expression turning serious. "But it's risky. Amos'll expect us to head for cover, and the Shoshone ain't always friendly to strangers." Levi weighed the odds. A trading post meant supplies, maybe allies, but it also meant walking into a potential trap. The Locket's map was their only lead, and Nora Blackwood might be the key to unraveling it. He looked at Ellie, her face set with determination, and felt that same reckless pull from the riverbed, the one that had made him keep the locket instead of handing it over. "We go," he said, his voice steady, "but we travel light and fast, no mistakes." They set out at first light, the horses picking their way through the hills under a sky streaked with pink and gold. The tension from the night before lingered, but so did Jasper's knack for lightening it. "You know," he said, riding beside Levi, "for a man about to lose his ranch, you're awful calm taking orders from a woman." Levi shot him a look, half amused, half annoyed. "She ain't giving orders. She's just loud about her opinions." Ellie, riding ahead, turned in her saddle, her eyes narrowing. "I heard that, Stratton. Keep talking, and I'll leave you to explain yourself to Amos's whip." Jasper cackled, wincing as the motion jostled his wound. "See? Married couple." Levi's face heated again, and he busied himself adjusting Juniper's reins, ignoring Ellie's smirk. The banter kept the fear at bay, but the weight of the locket and the map never left him. By midday, the trading post came into view, a ramshackle cluster of cabins surrounded by a low wooden fence. Smoke curled from a chimney, and a Shoshone woman in a beaded vest stood at the gate, watching their approach with sharp eyes. "Nora," Jasper called, raising a hand. The woman, Nora Blackwood, Levi presumed, nodded, her expression guarded but not hostile. She was older, her dark hair streaked with silver, but she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who'd seen the world's teeth and smiled back. "Jasper Cole," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "You bring trouble to my door again?" "Only the best kind," Jasper replied, dismounting with a grunt. He gestured to Levi and Ellie. "This here's Levi Stratton and Ellie Boone. They're in a bit of a bind." Nora's eyes flicked to Ellie, lingering on her rifle, then to Levi, sizing him up. "You're the rancher from Sheridan," she said. "Heard about your troubles. And you?" She turned to Ellie, her gaze softening. "You look like your pa. He was a good man, till the gold fever got him." Ellie stiffened, her hand tightening on the roan's reins. "You knew my pa?" Nora nodded. Knew him well. Knew what he hid too. Her eyes darted to Levi's pocket, as if she could see the locket through the fabric. "You've got it, don't you?" Before Levi could answer, a shout rang out from the hills behind them. He spun, his revolver drawn, as a lone rider crested the ridge. Gus Harlan, his beard unmistakable, his rifle raised. But he wasn't alone. Shadows moved behind him, more riders than Levi could count, their war cries rising like a tide. "Inside!" Nora barked, throwing open the gate. Levi grabbed Ellie's arm, pulling her toward the cabins as Jasper hobbled after them. Gunfire cracked, a bullet splintering the fence. Levi's heart pounded, the Locket's weight a reminder of the stakes. They'd found shelter, but Amos Creed was closing in, and the map's secret was no longer theirs alone. The trading post's wooden walls shuddered as another bullet slammed into the fence outside, the crack of gunfire mingling with the red blade gang's distant war cries. Levi Stratton shoved Ellie Boone through the cabin door, his hand lingering on her arm a moment longer than necessary, the heat of her skin grounding him against the chaos. Nora Blackwood barred the door behind them, her movement swift and practiced, while Jasper Cole collapsed onto a stool, his wounded arm trembling, but his rifle still clutched tight. The air inside was thick with the scent of wood smoke and dried herbs, the flickering lantern casting shadows that danced across Ellie's face, her gray eyes wide with a mix of fear and fire. Levi's heart still raced from their flight, the locket in his pocket a silent anchor, tying him to her, to the map, to a future neither could yet see. Nora moved to a narrow window, peering through a crack in the shutter. "They're circling," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Amos won't rush in, not yet. He likes to play with his prey." She glanced at Ellie, her expression softening. "Your pa would have been proud, girl. Foolish, but proud." Ellie's jaw tightened, her gaze dropping to the floorboards. "He was foolish enough to think gold could fix everything," she said, her southern drawl soft but bitter. "Look where that got him." Levi wanted to ask more, to unravel the tangle of her past, but the weight of the moment pressed against them. Nora gestured to a trapdoor in the corner. "Cellars below," she said. "Hide there till we know their numbers. Jasper, you're with me. We'll hold the door." Jasper nodded, wincing as he stood. "Don't get cozy down there, you two," he said, his grin weak but teasing. "Ain't the time for that." Levi's face flushed, and he caught Ellie's quick glance, her cheeks tinged pink despite the tension. "Move, sheet," he muttered, avoiding her eyes as he lifted the trap door. The cellar stairs creaked under their weight, descending into a cool, earthen darkness lit only by a single candle Nora handed down. The space was cramped, lined with barrels and crates, the air heavy with the scent of damp soil and stored grain. Levi set the candle on a crate, its flame casting a warm glow over Ellie's features as she leaned against the wall, her rifle resting beside her. The trapdoor thudded shut above, muffling the sounds of Nora and Jasper's preparations. In the sudden quiet, Levi felt the space between him and Ellie shrink, the cellar's walls pressing them closer. Her breath was uneven, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her torn dress, and for the first time since the river, she looked less like a fugitive and more like a woman carrying too much for too long. He shifted, his boots scuffing the dirt floor, and cleared his throat. "You all right?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Ellie's eyes met his, searching as if trying to decide whether he was worth trusting. "Been better," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You didn't have to stick your neck out back there, Stratton. Most men would have run." Levi shrugged, leaning against a barrel, his shoulder inches from hers. "Most men ain't losing their ranch to the bank," he said. "Guess I'm desperate enough to pick a fight with the devil." He paused, his gaze dropping to her hands, then back to her face. "Or maybe I just don't like seeing a woman cornered." Her smile faded, replaced by something raw, unguarded. "You don't know me, Levi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what I've done." He stepped closer, the candlelight flickering in her eyes, and felt the pull of her words, her presence, like the river's current dragging him under. "Then tell me," he said, his voice low, steady. "What's a woman like you running from? Not just Amos." The truth. Ellie's breath caught, her eyes locked on his. And for a moment, the world outside, the gunfire, the hunters, the gold, faded away. She reached out, her fingers brushing his, tentative, like she was testing the weight of a decision. "I helped Pa hide that gold," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "After the robbery, he swore it'd be our way out, but Amos was his partner back then. When Pa cut him out, Amos swore he'd take it all, me included." Levi's chest tightened, a surge of anger mixing with something softer, more dangerous. He closed the distance between them, his hand finding hers, the calluses of his palm rough against her skin. "He won't touch you," he said, the words a vow he hadn't meant to make. "Not while I'm here." Her eyes softened and she leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek. The candle's glow traced the curve of her jaw, the faint scar above her brow, and Levi felt his resolve fraying, his heart pounding not from fear but from the nearness of her. She tilted her head, her lips parting, and for a heartbeat he thought she might pull away. Instead she rose on her toes, closing the gap, her kiss soft but urgent, like a secret she'd held too long. He kissed her back, his hands finding her waist, pulling her gently against him. The world narrowed to the warmth of her, the taste of dust and defiance on her lips, the way her fingers curled into his shirt, anchoring him. It was reckless, with death circling above, but in that moment, the cellar was a sanctuary. Their shared breath, a rebellion against the odds. Her hand slid up his chest, lingering at the locket's weight in his pocket, and he felt the map's promise burn between them, not just gold, but something deeper, binding them in ways neither could name. A muffled shout from above broke the spell. Ellie pulled back, her cheeks flushed, her eyes wide with a mix of desire and alarm. Levi's heart raced, his hand still tingling from her touch. "We ain't done with this," he said, his voice rough, a promise wrapped in a challenge. She nodded, her lips curving into a half smile. "Hope not, rancher." The trapdoor creaked open, Nora's voice sharp. "Get up here, they're moving in." Levi grabbed the candle, snuffing it out, and followed Ellie up the stairs, his revolver drawn. The intimacy of the cellar lingered, a fragile thread woven through the danger waiting above. As they emerged into the cabin, Nora pointed to the window, where shadows flickered in the moonlight. Amos's men, closer now, their chants replaced by the clink of spurs and the cocking of guns. The Locket's map was their only hope, But Levi knew the real treasure was the woman beside him, her courage and secrets now tangled with his own. The cabin's air was thick with tension, the clink of spurs outside cutting through the silence like a blade. Levi Stratton stood shoulder to shoulder with Ellie Boone, his revolver steady, her rifle poised, as Nora Blackwood crouched by the window, her sharp eyes tracking the shadows of Amos Creed's men creeping closer. Jasper Cole leaned against the wall, his wounded arm trembling but his rifle ready, his weathered face set with grim resolve. The locket in Levi's pocket felt heavier than ever, its map to Blackwood Gorge, a beacon drawing death to their door. The memory of Ellie's kiss lingered, warm and reckless, but the approaching threat snapped Levi's focus back to the present. The Red Blade Gang's movements were deliberate, their silhouettes weaving through the moonlight like wolves circling a wounded herd. Nora's voice was a low hiss. They're splitting up, flanking us. Amos is out there, waiting for his moment. She glanced at Ellie, her silver-streaked hair glinting in the lantern's glow. That map of yours, girl. It's the only thing keeping us alive. You sure it's worth it? Ellie's jaw tightened, her gray eyes flashing with defiance. It's all I got left of Pa, she said, and it's our way out. Her gaze flicked to Levi, a silent plea or challenge. He couldn't tell which. The weight of her trust, fragile as it was, anchored him, even as the danger closed in. Levi nodded, his mind racing. We hold him off till dawn, he said. Then we make for the gorge. Nora, you know the land, any way to slip past him? Nora's lips quirked, a faint spark of mischief in her eyes. There's a ravine out back, runs parallel to the Shoshone Trail. Narrow, but it'll hide you till you're clear of the post. Sheep-eyes, her gaze hardening. But you'll need a diversion. Jasper and I can draw their fire. Jasper snorted, wincing as he shifted his wounded arm. Speak for yourself, woman. I ain't planning to be a martyr just yet. Levi's chest tightened. The plan was a gamble, but they were out of options. He turned to Ellie, her face half lit by the lantern, her breath steady despite the fear in her eyes. You ready to run? He asked. She nodded, her hand brushing his briefly. A spark of warmth in the cold dread of the moment. With you. Reckon I am. The words hit harder than they should, stirring something deep in Levi's chest, but there was no time to dwell. Nora handed them a satchel of supplies, jerky, a canteen, a flint, and pointed to a back door half hidden behind a stack of crates. Go when you hear the first shot, she said. Don't look back. Levi and Ellie slipped toward the door, the cabin's walls creaking under the weight of the night. A sudden crash shattered the quiet, a window splintering as a rock sailed through, followed by a guttural shout. Boone! Amos Creed's voice sliced through the air, cold and commanding. You can't hide forever. Give me the map, and I'll let your friends live. Ellie froze, her rifle trembling in her hands. Levi grabbed her arm, his voice low. He's lying. Don't listen. But her eyes were distant, haunted, as if Amos's voice had dragged her back to a past she couldn't escape. Before she could respond, Jasper fired through the broken window, the shot echoing like thunder. Go, Nora hissed, shoving them toward the door. Levi kicked it open, pulling Ellie into the cool night air, the ravine's shadow swallowing them as gunfire erupted behind. Jasper's rifle roared again, answered by a hail of bullets that splintered the cabin's walls. Levi's heart pounded, guilt clawing at him for leaving Nora and Jasper, but Ellie's hand in his kept him moving. They scrambled down the ravine, the earth slick under their boots, the sounds of battle fading behind the high walls of dirt and rock. The locket bounced against Levi's chest, the map's promise urging them forward. Ellie's breath was ragged, her face pale in the moonlight, but she matched his pace, her rifle slung over her shoulder. The ravine narrowed, forcing them closer, their shoulders brushing as they ran. Levi's mind churned. Blackwood Gorge, the gold, Amos's relentless pursuit. But Ellie's silence gnawed at him, her earlier words about Amos echoing. He was her father's partner. What else wasn't she telling? They reached a fork in the ravine, the path splitting into darkness. Levi slowed, catching his breath, and turned to Ellie. "Which way?" he asked, his voice low. "You know this land better than me." She hesitated, her eyes darting between the paths, then pointed left. "That one. It'll take us toward the gorge." But her voice wavered, a crack that made Levi's gut twist. He grabbed her wrist, gentle but firm. "Ellie, what ain't you telling me? About Amos, about the gold. I'm risking my neck for you. Give me the truth." Her eyes met his, wide and raw, and for a moment, he thought she'd pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It ain't just gold, Levi. It's blood money. Pa didn't just rob a stagecoach. He crossed Amos, and Amos killed him for it. I was there." Her voice broke, tears glinting in her eyes. "I saw it, and I ran." Levi's breath caught, the weight of her words sinking in. But before he could speak, a shadow moved at the ravine's edge above them, a figure silent and swift, dropping into the path behind. Levi spun, revolver raised, but the figure was no bounty hunter. It was a woman, her dark hair braided tight, her Shoshone beadwork glinting in the moonlight. She held a knife, not raised but ready, her eyes locked on Ellie. "Ellie Boone," the woman said, her voice low and steady, like the river's current. "You carry my father's shame." Levi's hand tightened on his gun, his mind reeling. "Who are you?" he demanded, stepping in front of Ellie. The woman's gaze didn't waver. "Tessa Grayson," she said, "Nora's daughter, and the gold you seek belongs to my people, stolen by Ellie's father from a Shoshone caravan." She stepped closer, her knife catching the moonlight. "You've brought death to our door, Boone, and I want what's ours." Ellie's face drained of color, her rifle half raised but trembling. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Pa never said." "Enough lies," Tessa snapped, her voice sharp as flint. "Give me the map, or I take it from you." Levi's heart pounded, the locket burning in his pocket. The gold wasn't just a fortune. It was a curse, tied to a theft he hadn't begun to understand. Ellie's hand grazed his, her touch a plea, but her eyes were locked on Tessa, guilt and defiance warring in her gaze. Above the gunfire from the trading post grew sporadic, a sign that Nora and Jasper were still fighting. But for how long? Amos was coming, and now Tessa stood between them and the gorge, her knife a promise of a different kind of justice. Levi raised his revolver, not aiming but making his point. "We don't want to fight," he said, his voice steady. "But we ain't giving up that map. Step aside, Tessa, or we go through you." Tessa's eyes narrowed, her knife steady, but before she could answer, a low rumble echoed from the ravine's mouth, hoofbeats, too many to count. Amos had found them. The hoofbeats thundered closer, a relentless drumbeat echoing through the ravine's narrow walls, as if the earth itself was closing in on Levi Stratton and Ellie Boone. Tessa Grayson stood before them, her knife gleaming in the moonlight, her dark eyes blazing with righteous fury. The locket in Levi's pocket felt like a lead weight, its map to Blackwood Gorge now a tangled web of betrayal and blood. Ellie's hand still grazed his, her touch a fleeting anchor in the chaos, Havoc system. The response was cut off due to the length limit. Below is the continuation to complete Part 7, ensuring a smooth transition, heightened drama, awkward situations, a touch of humor, and compliance with YouTube's monetization policies. as Amos Creed's men charged nearer. Levi's revolver was steady, aimed at Tessa, but his heart pounded with the realization that they were trapped. Amos behind, Tessa in front, and nowhere to run. Ellie's breath was shallow beside him, her rifle half raised, her face pale with the weight of Tessa's accusation. The gold, stolen from Tessa's people, was no longer just a treasure. It was a wound, and Levi felt the sting of its truth in Ellie's trembling grip. Tessa took a step forward, her knife unwavering. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low and fierce. "That gold was our future, our survival. Your father took it, Boone, and left us to starve." Ellie's voice broke, raw with guilt. "I didn't know, Tessa. I swear it." Levi's eyes darted between them, the hoofbeats growing louder, dust rising from the ravine's mouth. "We ain't got time for this," he said, his voice sharp but calm. "Tessa, you want justice? Help us get to the gorge, and you can have the gold. But if Amos catches us, it's gone for good." Tessa's gaze flickered, doubt creeping into her resolve. Before she could answer, a bullet whizzed past, embedding in the ravine wall. Levi shoved Ellie down, pulling her behind a boulder as Tessa dove for cover. The Red Blade gang poured into the ravine, Amos at their head, his whip coiled like a snake. His coal-black eyes locked onto Levi, a predator's smile spreading across his face. "Well, well," Amos called, his voice smooth as venom. "The rancher, the thief's daughter, and now a Shoshone traitor. Quite the party." Levi fired, the shot grazing Amos's arm, but the man barely flinched, his whip cracking in response. The leather lashed out, wrapping around Levi's revolver and yanking it from his hand. Ellie fired her rifle, the bullet kicking up dirt at Amos's feet, but the gang's gunfire forced them deeper behind the boulder. Tessa, crouched nearby, hesitated, her knife still raised, but her eyes on Ellie, searching. "Help us," Ellie pleaded, her voice shaking. "I'll make it right, Tessa, I swear." Tessa's jaw clenched, her gaze darting to the gang. A tense moment passed, then she lowered her knife, nodding sharply. "You better mean it, Boone," she whistled, and from the shadows, two Shoshone riders appeared on horseback, bows drawn. "Get to the horses," Tessa said. "We'll cover you." Levi grabbed his revolver from the dirt, his heart racing as he and Ellie sprinted toward Juniper and the roan. Tethered at the ravine's end, Tessa and her men unleashed a volley of arrows, scattering the gang. Levi hoisted Ellie onto the roan, their eyes meeting for a fleeting, electric moment. Trust, fear, and something deeper binding them. He swung onto Juniper, Tessa leaping onto her own horse nearby. They galloped out of the ravine, the Shoshone rider's arrows keeping Amos at bay. Jasper's horse thundered beside them, a surprise that drew a bark of laughter from Levi despite the chaos. "Old man still kickin'," he shouted. Jasper, riding hard, grinned through the pain of his wounded arm. "Told you, Stratton, I ain't dying yet." The humor was short-lived. Amos's gang regrouped, their horses gaining, bullets whining past. Tessa led them into a maze of gullies, her knowledge of the land, their only edge. But as they rounded a bend, Levi's stomach dropped. A barricade of fallen logs blocked the path, too high to jump. They were trapped. "Damn it," Levi growled, reining in Juniper. Ellie's face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. Tessa dismounted, her expression grim. "Old trapper's blockade," she said. "We'll have to climb." Levi glanced back. The gang was closing in, Amos's whip cracking in the distance. "No time," he said, his mind racing. He turned to Ellie, the Locket's weight a reminder of their stakes. "You trust me?" Her smile was faint, trembling. Reckon I do, rancher. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a narrow gap in the logs. Tessa, Jasper, hold 'em off, he shouted, squeezing through, Ellie close behind. Tessa's riders fired arrows, Jasper's rifle booming, but the gang's numbers were overwhelming. On the other side, Levi and Ellie stumbled into a clearing, the horses barely squeezing through. Tessa and Jasper followed, but one of Tessa's riders fell, an arrow in his back. Amos's men had bows now, too. Levi's heart sank, but Tessa's face was stone, her knife flashing as she cut a path forward. They ran, the gorge looming ahead, its dark walls promising shelter or a tomb. But as they neared, a figure stepped from the shadows, a Shoshone elder, his face painted with red streaks, a rifle aimed at Levi's chest. "You bring death to our land," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The gold is cursed." Levi froze, his hand on his revolver, Ellie's breath hitching beside him. Tessa stepped forward, her voice urgent. "Father, they're not the enemy. Amos is." The elder's eyes narrowed, his rifle steady. "They carry the map. They seek the gold." Levi's pulse pounded, the awkwardness of the moment clashing with the danger. "We ain't here to steal," he said, raising his hands. "We're trying to keep it from Amos. Help us, and it's yours." The elder's gaze softened, but before he could speak, Amos's whip cracked, wrapping around Jasper's leg and yanking him down. Ellie screamed, firing her rifle, but Amos was too fast, his men swarming the clearing. Levi dove, tackling Ellie to the ground as bullets flew, Tessa and the elder returning fire. In the chaos, Levi's eyes locked on Ellie's, the Locket's promise burning between them. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice fierce. "Always," she whispered back, her hand squeezing his. Tessa's knife flashed, cutting Jasper free, but Amos's men closed in, their war cries deafening. The elder's rifle roared, dropping one, but the odds were grim. Levi pulled Ellie toward the gorge, Tessa and Jasper limping behind, the elder covering their retreat. The Locket's map was their only hope, but Amos's shadow loomed, his whip a promise of death. The gorge's dark walls loomed like sentinels as Levi Stratton dragged Ellie Boone forward, her hand tight in his, their breaths ragged against the din of gunfire and Amos Creed's relentless war cries. Tessa Grayson and her father, the Shoshone elder, fired from behind, their shots echoing off the canyon stone, while Jasper Cole limped alongside, his rifle spitting defiance despite the blood seeping from his leg. The locket in Levi's pocket burned with the weight of its map, the promise of Blackwood Gorge's gold, now a beacon of hope and doom. Amos's men swarmed the clearing, their bullets kicking up dirt, his whip cracking like a storm breaking loose. The elder's voice rang out, a command in Shoshone, and Tessa's knife flashed, cutting down another outlaw, but the tide was turning against them. Levi's heart pounded, Ellie's whispered always, echoing in his mind, binding them in a vow stronger than the chaos around them. They stumbled into the gorge's mouth, the narrow path swallowing them in shadow. The walls rose high, jagged and cool, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and pine. Levi pulled Ellie behind a boulder, his revolver raised, scanning for Amos. Tessa and the elder took cover nearby, their faces grim but resolute, while Jasper slumped against the rock, his breath labored. "Ain't exactly how I pictured my last stand," Jasper muttered, a wry grin breaking through his pain. "But I reckon it's a hell of a story." Ellie's eyes flashed, her rifle steady despite the tremble in her hands. "You ain't done yet, old man," she said, her southern drawl fierce. She turned to Levi, her gaze softening for a fleeting moment. We gotta find it, Levi. The gold. It's the only way to end this. Levi nodded, pulling the locket from his pocket. He flipped it open, the map's crude lines etched in his mind. Blackwood Gorge, the cross marking a hidden cache. "Where's the Narrows?" he asked Tessa's father, his voice urgent. The elder's eyes, deep with sorrow, met his. "Beyond the bend," he said, pointing deeper into the gorge. "But the gold is cursed. It brings only death." "Then we'll break the curse," Levi said, his voice steady, though doubt gnawed at him. He grabbed Ellie's hand, pulling her forward. "Stay close." They moved deeper, the gorge's walls closing in, the gunfire behind growing sporadic as Tessa and the elder held the line. Jasper followed, his steps uneven but stubborn. The path twisted, the moonlight barely piercing the shadows, until they reached a narrow cleft where the gorge pinched tight. A pile of stones, unnatural in its neatness, marked the spot from the map. Levi knelt, his hands tearing at the rocks. Ellie beside him, her fingers digging into the cold earth. The stones gave way, revealing a small iron box, its surface rusted but intact. Levi's breath caught as he lifted it, the weight heavy with promise. Ellie's eyes widened, her hand trembling as she touched the lid. "Pa's cash," she whispered, her voice thick with grief and hope. Before Levi could open it, a whip cracked, the leather snaking around Ellie's wrist and yanking her back. She cried out, dropping her rifle, as Amos Creed stepped from the shadows, his coal-black eyes gleaming. "You're mine, Boone," he said, his voice a low growl. "And so's the gold." Levi lunged, his revolver firing, but Amos was faster, his whip lashing out, knocking the gun from Levi's hand. Tessa charged, her knife flashing, but Amos's men swarmed from the gorge's mouth, pinning her and the elder. Jasper fired, dropping one, but a bullet grazed his shoulder, sending him to his knees. Levi dove for Ellie, tackling Amos, his fist slamming into the man's jaw. The whip fell, and Ellie scrambled free, grabbing her rifle. Amos laughed, blood trickling from his lip, as he drew a knife. "You think you can keep her?" he snarled. "She's as cursed as the gold." Levi's eyes locked on Ellie, her face fierce despite the fear. "She's worth more than you'll ever know," he said, his voice steady. He lunged again, grappling Amos to the ground, the knife flashing between them. Ellie fired, her bullet hitting Amos's arm, forcing him to drop the blade. Levi pinned him, his knee on Amos's chest, his fist raised. "Stop!" Tessa's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. She stood over the iron box, her father beside her, his rifle aimed at Amos's men. "This ends now." Levi hesitated, his fists trembling, but Ellie's hand on his shoulder steadied him. "Let him live," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He ain't worth it." Tessa opened the box, revealing not gold bars, but a collection of Shoshone artifacts, beaded belts, carved stones, a small silver pendant etched with vines, like the locket. The elder's eyes softened, his voice heavy. "Our heritage," he said, "stolen to be sold. Your father betrayed us, Ellie, but you can make it right." Ellie nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I will," she said, handing the locket to Tessa. "It's yours." Amos struggled under Levi's grip, his face twisting with rage. "You're fools," he spat. "That's worth a fortune." Tessa's father stepped forward, his rifle steady. "Take him," he said to his men, who bound Amos and his remaining gang, their fight drained by the elder's command. The gorge fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of resolution. Levi stood, helping Ellie to her feet, their hands lingering together. The locket's pendant, now in Tessa's hands, gleamed in the moonlight, its vines a symbol of ties broken and mended. Jasper limped over, grinning despite his wounds. "Told you, Stratton, One hell of a story. Levi laughed, the sound raw but free, and pulled Ellie close, her warmth a promise of something new. They left the gorge at dawn, the Shoshone escorting Amos to face justice. The artifacts returned to their people. Levi's ranch was still at risk, but as he rode beside Ellie, her smile soft and sure, he knew they'd face it together. The Locket's secret had led him not to gold, but to her, a treasure worth more than any fortune.